guys. So, you know, as Culture 2 students, I thought this was a really nice way to kind of close out the year of this program, which is Global Studies and Survival French program, because, you know, you as Cultures 1 students, you learned about the code of French, and you learned about the transformation of Romance languages from Latin and how they developed, in addition to learning about world events and some survival French. And this year, as we're expanding our French, I would like you to think about, as we go through the journey with Jhumpa Lahiri, of, you know, what does it mean to assimilate culture into your use of language? I mean, what I want to explore is, some of you may never have been to a foreign-speaking country. Not all my students have been to Europe. I went at age 20, and I had studied 11 years of French. So not everybody has the wonderful gift of travel to a foreign country, but a lot of Parker students have, but not all. But just about everybody in my classes has, at some point, encountered, either because they've met somebody on the street who happens to be lost and visiting as a tourist in our city of Chicago, or they've gone to another neighborhood where maybe the dominant language is in English. So if you've been to Pilsen and other areas of our city, every one of my students has experienced what it must be like to either be of the dominant culture and helping somebody out who isn't, or maybe not being of the dominant culture if you've had the wonderful opportunity to travel. And so what I want to use this book for is to have you consider how language is a lens to more than just mechanics and grammar. I mean, why is it that we ask our students to learn another language? Is it just because of the mental gymnastics and the cognitive benefits that some of you have talked about when we started talking about this book, and it makes you smarter, if you will, or they know that the research has shown that your brain's just jumping through the hoops of how to learn a language, even if you never really master it, is going to enhance other skills. Yeah, that's true, and I like that that's just a byproduct of learning language, but I want to explore Lahiri's journey because it gets to something deeper. So we looked at some of the questions. We're just at the book jacket. We haven't even, you know, dove into the book yet. But I think even the book jacket and the back cover, sometimes you can get a real good idea about what you're about to plunge into for a book. Sometimes there's spoiler alerts, like they don't have spoiler alerts, and this isn't a novel. So let's take a look at some of the questions that we were going to talk about today, and then maybe you can share some of your personal stories about, can you relate to some of what is written about. So the first, from the author's note, what is Lahiri's, what is her mother tongue? What language did she grow up speaking, and where was she living?
Bengali.
Okay, so she was speaking Bengali, but where was she being raised? Was she in India, or was she in the United States?
United States.
Okay, so she's in the United States, but she has Bengali parents, and her parents are speaking to her in one language, but what was the language she was learning in kindergarten and in school? English. So she was speaking with her friends in a different language than her parents were speaking to her. Can you think of, are there other immigrants to our city and to our country that have that experience on a daily basis? What immigrants? From what countries do you think? I mean, what are the largest? So Poland,
Mexico.
right? So Poland, we have the largest Polish population outside of Warsaw, so a lot of Polish immigrants. They could basically survive here living in Polish neighborhoods. I used to live in one where they did all their shopping. They took their buses to only a 4-block, you know, area, and they didn't know any English, and they were living here for 25 years. They could survive in Chicago if that was their world. So Polish, we talked about Spanish because we have a lot of Spanish-speaking immigrants from the country just south of here, Mexico, but also Central America and other Spanish. So certainly there are neighborhoods where Spanish, is spoken in the stores, in the restaurants, and a lot of people don't really need to learn English, and you can be here for 20, 25 years. So yes, we have immigrant populations where Lowry's experience of speaking Bengali at home, but learning a different language at school is their daily experience. What was her relationship to Bengali? How did she feel about Bengali versus English, and why? What do we know about her knowledge of Bengali?
She wasn't able to read or write it.
Right, she didn't have broad literacy in Bengali. It was a language that was of la tradition orale. What's la tradition orale?
The oral tradition.
And what do I mean by that, the oral tradition?
They only spoke it and they didn't write it down.
And what was it used for? Basic communication, but what else? She had a very rich exposure to Bengali through what? Yes, storytelling. Her parents, her mother in particular, told her stories, and what else? Music, right? She loved to listen to the music and hear the stories and the poetry, but she herself never learned to read the wonderful literature of Bengali because she went to English language school at kindergarten and then learned to read and write English. Did she have the same emotional connection to English as she did Bengali? Well, she talks about that in that tape that we watched, right? The subtitled tape. Does she regret not learning how to read Bengali? I think she says that, doesn't she? That she always regretted not being able to read the great literature. And so she turned her attention to what language? She read the classics of what language?
Italian?
Well, before Italian even.
English?
Everybody?
Latin.
Latin. She was really intrigued by the puzzle of Latin. And she liked Latin so much that then it was a natural leap from Latin to Italian. And did she go to Italy?
Yes.
Okay, so she went to
with
Italy.
her sister,
She-
like when she after she was 20, so I'm not sure if that's after college, but it said like when she was around 20,
Yeah.
and she just went to visit in Florence because she enjoyed like art and architecture. So she took the visit without knowing Italian, but later she found her way there again.
Yeah, she was just fascinated by seeing the works of art that she had read about and the architecture that she had read about.
Then later after that, she ended up taking her entire family and ended up immersing herself in the language, doing
Yeah.
everyday tasks within the language.
Yeah, she decided that going as a tourist wasn't enough. Why? What did she find when she went to Italy as a tourist? What was lacking?
The cultural experience. Like when you just go as a tourist, usually stay at a hotel and you're not like fully immersed into like the culture of like Italy or anywhere you are. So I think she wanted to like fully immerse herself by like taking the trip there and living there. By like even with not knowing the language, she took the risk and to fully immerse herself into the culture and the language.
Yeah, and I think we talked about this before. For those of you who have been tourists, how many of you have been outside of the country? Okay, we talked about this a little bit, that the nature of tourism and economies that rely upon tourism, you can go just about anywhere, the remotest village somewhere, and some of you were telling me you can speak English, that a lot, especially urban centers, if you go to cities in places around the globe, that if you don't speak the language of the locals, you can get by in English because they're catering to the tourists that are visiting, right? But I like what you just said. I mean, is it really the same thing if you're buying gifts for your family or you're eating in a restaurant and ordering off the menu? Is it the same thing as really living the
Going
culture?
shopping every day and like getting
Yeah.
your groceries is different than going to the restaurants and going to like the special shops where you go where you're a tourist. But,
Yeah.
like she, now that she lives there, fully has to culturally like live there, I guess, and has to like do what we do every day here, but there. So she has to pay the bills and all that stuff.
Yeah, she wanted to really, you know, go further than tourism. So she picks up her family and she moves with her 2 kids, and she moves to Rome. And you read in the opening book, this is a dual language book. What does that mean, dual language?
All the books written in 2 different languages.
So how is it?
Italian and English.
Is it every line, or how is it?
So the left side I believe is Italian and the right side is English.
Yeah. So it's a dual language book. Why do you think it's a dual language book? I mean, for what public is it being written as a dual language book? How many people in America are going to pick up a book and be interested in reading it in both languages, or how many are capable? Why do you think she did it in dual language? Why not just have an English version and an Italian version for an Italian public?
Well, I think that because she wanted to have an opportunity where people can look at Italian, and as they're reading about the language, they can see the language right in front of them. And if they're at all curious, they can try to read it themselves. And she wants her readers to feel how she felt when first reading it.
Well, and I think you have a point there in that it isn't so much that you need to be fluent in Italian in order to get something from that left page in Italian. It's really to see what she was able to produce. How many of her books have been in Italian?
Just this one.
Has she written in Italian before? Well, don't shake your head. I want to hear something come out of your mouth.
I don't think so.
Well, we talked about this before. All her other books are in what language?
English.
Are in English. So I think she wants people who know her work, especially, you know, this is a rather extraordinary accomplishment. So she wants them to see what she was able to produce in this new language of hers. Why did she want to find a new voice? What was her motivation? Why wasn't English sufficient? Why did she want to find a new voice to write in? It's one thing to want to live there and connect with the people, but why write a book in Italian?
She didn't feel an emotional connection to English in the same way she felt an emotional connection to Italian.
Yeah, I think we saw that video where this kind of framed the context for your reading this. And so, Shaul, you're remembering quite well that for some reason, even though she's read the classics and she's completely fluent in English and literate, she just, something was missing. She always felt something was missing. And when she visited Italy, before she could really speak well, there was some emotional response, wasn't there? Maybe it was the art, maybe it was the architecture, but also the people. And she was really compelled to want to be able to communicate with them, right? So she writes, but did she write the English version that's on the right-hand side?
No.
Who did?
This woman by the name of Anne Goldstein wrote the English translated version. She has done like many Italian works before, so this wasn't her first. And Lahiri approached her to translate it for her because Lahiri knew her works were always up to par with her writing in the past.
Yeah, she's a well-known translator of Italian. And so one of the first questions I had you look at, so can you share your answers? Why did Lahiri, if she's an English language writer and all her books were in English and she's completely fluent in English, why didn't she translate her own book from the Italian into the English? Why did she ask Anne Goldstein to do that?
Because Lahiri wanted her Italian work to be as raw as possible. She asked Anne Goldstein to translate into English just so she wouldn't feel compelled to have to switch her whole brain over to English again and try to polish it. She wanted it to be really raw and real. So if she had translated herself to English, it would have taken that rawness away and would have made her polish the work, which she didn't want to do.
Yeah, well said. She didn't want to be a perfectionist, and she didn't want to, try to, as you put it, I like your word, polish it up, and change what she had already written in Italian to make it better or to make it different. So she wanted the certain freedom to have somebody else read her work in Italian and use their voice in the English. So I think I couldn't have said it better. How long? The second question: for how long has Lahiri written exclusively in Italian then? How long did it take her to write this book?
She's like, she stopped speaking English like for a little bit